I want to thank SysDream and all of the people for an amazing conference, for Olivier and Layla, Sebastian, the entire SysDream crew. Let's hear it for them. Several months ago, when Olivia and I were talking, I said, you know, I've been having trouble in the United States holding a good discussion on NSA, Snowden, global surveillance. I said, I want to do it in France. He told me no. How many times? 5 or 10 times. He says, no, I'm too nervous, I'm too nervous. And so I was finally able to convince him. And then I said, oh, by the way, I want beer at the event. And then that was more no's. But at any rate, here we are. And this is the first time I think that any of us have really had an opportunity, because in the U.S., what we're going to be talking about, we cannot get an awful lot of the people who really could help with the debate and understand the different positions to actually do it in public. So this event, just so you are aware, is being videotaped. If you ask questions, you likely will be videotaped in the process. So we're going to keep this as a highly interactive process so that we can get you involved and ask some of the, hopefully, the tough questions. So please, I'm going to ask you, keep your questions short, no long rants in the questions, because we have weapons up here. And Olivier will use them. I'll listen to that, Republicans in the back row. So what we've got, and here are the folks up here. There's Hans van der Looy from Holland, Annie from sort of the UK and now living in Berlin, she will explain. Eric is with the Gendarmerie here in France, and Dave Kennedy from TrustedSec you all know. As a note here, I'm specifically with regards to Dave, because I could not get Keith Alexander or the CIA to show up here. Dave has agreed to play the role of the NSA, so this is not... Say it again, Dave, I don't think your mic was on.
I said that means don't throw anything at me, please. That's a soft.
He's playing a role, and he's going to play the role, I think we called it asshole.
Yeah, playing very well.
So we are going to videotape it. We are not streaming. The entire event will be edited in a studio in the United States. We're going to have NSA make sure that it's all vetted and okay with them before we send it back, and then it'll be available online sometime in the next few weeks, is what we're expecting.
With malware included to it.
Oh, malware is all over my video, Dave. So to begin with, I've asked each of the panelists and debaters to introduce themselves and an early view of what their position is going to be throughout this debate. And again, Dave's playing a role here. Is where it really believes and where he doesn't believe, I don't know. So you can talk to him and buy him a beer later, somewhere where we're watching us lose another soccer match. So the first person to speak will be Dave introducing himself, and then Annie, who I was just informed earlier has won debates at the universities in the United Kingdom. So,
pressure.
No pressure whatsoever. Then we're going to return to the right side with Eric. He'll open with his comments, then Hans will wrap it up. At that point, I have a couple of prepared questions. Hopefully you've got some ready. Raise your hands. Layla, so everybody knows who you are. She'll have one microphone. I believe there may be another running around. And then we're going to hand it over to the audience and try to get this really, really going. So with that, thank Olivier for allowing us to do this. And Dave Kennedy, NSA. Let's hear it.
First of all, I appreciate everybody coming out here to listen to us debate and talk, and I really hope that it does some decent discussions, because I think it's really important for us to get out there, kind of express what we're feeling, and come to some sort of middle ground to kind of work back and forth in. But in stating that, just a little brief background on my history. I'm Dave Kennedy. I'm a founder of TrustedSec, and I work for the intelligence community for a number of years. I was a Marine in the intelligence community. I spent a few years in Iraq doing forensics analysis. I also did cyber warfare. I did mostly signals intelligence and code breaking and cryptography stuff and all that good things. So I have a pretty extensive experience working for the government and working with them for different types of collections. I was co-author of Metasploit the Penetration Tester's Guide. I wrote the Social Engineer Toolkit. I started at a conference called DerbyCon. I present almost every year at Black Hat and DEF CON, and been in Hackin In Paris now, I think, for a few years. And most notably, I was on testifying in front of Congress a couple of times, discussing a lot of the issues that we have with security in the government space. And I'm also on a lot of the different news media outlets, like BBC, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, a lot of the different media outlets kind of talking about different security-related issues. But for me today, really my purpose is representing, more so on the NSA side of, what are our thoughts on the United States, where do we come from, and why are we doing what we're doing? And, opinions obviously on things like Snowden and PRISM and everything else that you hear in the media, and really kind of the narrow view that I think we really get, from both the media and everything else that gets leaked out there. My purpose is to kind of spark that debate and keep it going to kind of discuss, kind of the mentality behind the government and the NSA and what we're doing.
I also want to thank the organisers for inviting me to speak at this event. I think it's going to be fun. My name is MACHON. I used to work as a British intelligence officer for MI5, the UK Domestic Security Service, in the 1990s, before resigning in order to help my partner, a man called David Shaler, blow the whistle on a whole series of crime spies, which culminated in an illegal assassination attempt of Colonel Gaddafi in 1996, which killed innocent people. So we resigned, we went to the media, and we preemptively went on the run across Europe before the story broke. We did Edward Snowden. We then ended up living in hiding for a year, in exile for another 2 years. Family members, friends, activists, and journalists were arrested around the case, and David Shaler went to prison not once but twice. First of all, when he was arrested in France, when the Brits asked for his extradition, and they failed. And then subsequently, when he returned, he manned up and faced the music and went back to the UK to face trial for his disclosures, and inevitably went back to prison upon conviction. From this experience, I learned a lot about how the media narrative can be controlled by those in power. And most importantly, I think, I learned the value of privacy, because during those years, it was very clear that our communications were intercepted, that we had no privacy in our home, because it was bugged, including our bedroom, and that some of our friends were turned against us. And that's what it's like to live under a police state. Now, what we did was an unusual thing, and we had unusual consequences in those days, those analog days in the 1990s. However, of course, what we know now is that we were all being watched, and all being surveyed, and all being spied on. And I would suggest that it's not just corrosive personally to have no privacy, and it is, I know from personal experience. It is corrosive for our very democracy, because if you don't have privacy, you can't read, write, exchange, organise, have a relationship, have family relationships without feeling that you are being watched. Then you start to self-censor. And that is precisely what happened in the 1930s in the run-up to Nazi Germany. So I suggest that privacy, very importantly, is still a fundamental human right.
Good afternoon, I'm FREYSSINET from the Gendarmerie Nationale in France. A bit about my background. I have a technical background and took the force in 1995 and have been working on IT forensics, IT-related crime since 1998. My current job is head of the cybercrime division for the Gendarmerie, a unit in charge of proactive internet investigations. We find instances of crime on the internet, mainly through open sources and covered investigations. And we have a coordination role for IT investigations within the Gendarmerie Nationale, which is, for those who don't know the system in France, one of the two national police forces. Actually the EUCTF is quoted in my name here. I'm vice chair of the EUCTF. That is a group of chiefs of cybercrime units from all over the European Union that gathers twice trying to coordinate with Europol to fight cybercrime. My position in this debate is to mainly to keep the trust between law enforcement in general and the public, explain to you today and to the public in general that whatever is being said about, I heard everybody being watched, for everyday law enforcement work, that is fighting crime day to day, there's no such thing. We don't have such tools. We need to go through proper channels to get access to information. Sometimes it's difficult. It gets from 1 hour to a couple of months to get access to a simple identification of the user of an IP address for any type of crime. So that's our everyday job. And we need to improve our techniques, still get access to that information. And that's my point. Thank you.
Hello, my name is LOOY. I studied computer science in, well, last century, previous one. After that, I worked as a programmer for a couple of years and have always been interested in security and hacking. Well, not only computers, but also logs, for instance. After a couple of years, I started my own company called Madison, Gurkha, and we perform penetration testing and vulnerability scans for the major companies in the Netherlands. I think that, well, I can relate to various stands from, well, I think all persons over here on stage. And I think one of the most important things is transparency. Yeah? We don't know what is going on, and we the people should know what is going on, because that's the only way we can actually influence things. So that's why I think that Snowden did an enormous effort to get people involved in what was actually going on. As a matter of fact, just a couple of years before Snowden, something else did a similar thing, and that thing, because it wasn't a person, that thing is called Stuxnet. Because before Stuxnet, we didn't know that these kind of attacks were actually possible. So, my point is, transparency is very important, privacy is very important, and people seem to forget that more often than not. The most stupid answer I get from people when I ask, don't you think that your privacy is important, is that, well, I've got nothing to hide. Everybody got something to hide, and it's their right that they have something to hide. And one other thing, big data will help you, will help corporations, will help governments to profile you, but what do you get in return? That's it.
First question is going to be for Dave and the NSA. Why do you hate freedom? One of the big debates currently, and I'm focused from the U.S. standpoint because Snowden was an American. Some people prefer maybe that he's not. So I'm going to ask our panelists today, from 1 year ago to today, and from the view from 20 years from now, Snowden, traitor or hero? We're going to reverse the order. Hans.
Hero. I should keep my answer short, so yeah.
Error.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Hans was talking about transparency. We don't have all all the elements. So myself, I think there's both sides in this issue. So he's I'm sure he has there are lots of good aspects in what he's done, and there's some bad aspects. The lack of trust of someone who's working for a government that he's shown is difficult. So I don't know. Maybe if he gets a proper trial, we may know someday.
And
Do proper trials exist in the US anymore?
Absolutely.
Question. I would of course say hero. In fact, that's been debated by one of the Oxford Union Society recently. For two reasons. One, he obviously has thought through how he was going to approach his whistleblowing very carefully and has done it in a very responsible manner. But two, going back to my very fated classical education at Cambridge University, which was, what's the definition of a heros, which is the Greek word for hero, which is someone who, knowing that they will probably be destroyed, but trying to do something for the public good, will still take that risk. I can't think of anyone else who has done that to the same degree as Edward Snowden. I see him as the most significant whistleblower of modern history.
So probably an unpopular view here. You know, when you sign up for working for the Department of Defense, or you sign up working for the United States, there's an oath that you take to the government in order to protect those secrets and make sure that, you know, the lives that you have under your information you provide are protected and safe. And, you know, Snowden had previously stated that, you know, he had tried to express, you know, ethical concerns with what was happening with multiple different chains and wasn't having any success, and basically made this mind switch to all of a sudden start to steal all this information and release it to the public for heroism. I don't know if you know if anybody's familiar with the Freedom of Information Act in the United States, but if you're familiar with the Freedom of Information Act, there was actually a study that came out today where they requested all of the documents pertaining to Snowden's complaints to the United States government. Not one was found. Now you can say, hey, that's the United States government covering it up, and there's something there, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence supporting Snowden's claims that he actually complained and showed ethical violations and had a discontent of what was actually happening in the environment. So, you know, you have somebody that has a specific job for collection of intelligence, and believe me, I've worked with analysts in the past. These are good people that are trying to protect the United States. It's not like we're off, you know, like renegades and collecting everybody's information and looking at text messages and, you know, seeing what's going on with everything that's happening out there. We're actively going after bad people in this world, and believe me, what we have here today in Paris and in the United States and everywhere else, there's a lot of things that we've protected against in the past, and successful attacks we've protected against that have actually stopped people's lives from being lost. And, you know, I'm not, you know, obviously there's a very big balance between, you know, a police state, someone that sits there and continuously surveillances you, or a country that has defined rules, defined processes, defined, you know, constitutional rights, everything else that goes along with that, and trying to protect that to make sure that we continue to have the United States. And the NSA is absolutely the best spies in the world. That's what they do. So these revelations that you know, hey, we're actively doing this should be no surprise to anybody, because we've been doing it for 100 years. When signals first came out, we started blasting things through the airwaves. We started doing this type of stuff. Cryptography breaking, not a new concept. You know, we were doing it in World War II. I didn't see any complaints around the NSA in World War II.
Sorry, Dave, your time is up. Look, it says. Then I start I have to rebut that.
You're going to be next.
Because Edward Snowden did not sign an oath to the government of the USA. He signed.
You actually go through a clearance process, you do.
But he also swore to uphold the Constitution. Now, the USA government has egregiously broken the Constitution of the
Not
USA.
proven.
Oh, how come? How can you say that with the Patriot Act, which has shredded pretty much every fundamental amendment to the US Constitution, apart from number 2, which is the right to hold guns? That is rubbish.
If you have all access to the FISA courts and all of the approvals that have gone through for constitutional adherence, I'd like to see it, because it hasn't been
FISA
released.
courts are secret, and the chief spy has been caught out time and time again, lying under oath to Congress since Snowden came out about the number of terrorist acts that have been thwarted by FISA court rulings and the NSA warrants. So that's a load of crap, to be quite frank. You're doing a wonderful, wonderful job trying to defend the NSA, but they are indefensible. I've explained that better than what's happened.
Just so you know, I just bugged her phone. Just
Just so you know, I don't use Android or anything like that. I have the dark phone.
doesn't matter.
I want to follow up with the question that you began talking about was signals intelligence has existed for as long as there have been signals. In many places around the world, the concept is business is war. Very different sets of concepts, rules, and mores in different cultures and countries around the world. So if business is war and we now have a global competitive environment, what's wrong with what the NSA is doing, Hans?
I wouldn't focus on NSA only. Each and every country all over the world has their own intelligence organization, and they need it. The only difference is that these intelligence agencies focus on their goal, and their goal is not mass surveillance. While what the NSA is doing is using modern technology to the limit. They just try to gain access to each and every piece of information around. And I think that's wrong.
Eric?
Yeah. Do you think they're getting access to every piece? I'm asking a question. Do you think they're getting access to every piece of information, or they're putting themselves in a position to be able to access whatever needed, any piece of information that is going to be necessary?
It's not do they gain access to every piece of information. It's the lack of focus. They are using dragnets to gather information instead of focusing on enemies or whatever. I think each and every country has a right to have an organization like NSA, and each and every country has a right to defend their country, and each and every country has a right to gain information, to gain intelligence, but not on a scale like that.
Yeah, it's part of the difficulty of that job. So I'm a bit outside of that job, and we've seen the same debate in France over the winter on a law on intelligence, and it's the difficulty was that they're talking about something that should be kept secret, what they do in detail, how they do it, and so on, but there was a piece of legislation on the table that was debated and voted, and the members of parliament discussed that before with the specialists from those organizations, discussed it afterwards in public, and nobody understands because everybody is keeping the actual facts secret, because they need to keep it secret. So how can you create transparency on a subject that's so sensitive? Isn't that more about putting proper mechanisms to check, for instance, judges that are going to check? And
they should be around.
Yeah.
Are they not in France? Because over in the Netherlands, which is a very small country, we have those. And they don't function correctly all the time, but most of the time they do.
I guess it was, well, for being in contact with those agencies, I can tell you that they have difficult times deciding their bosses to work on a specific target, to prove that they need to get access to that information before they can even start working on it. So there are processes in place.
I would like to contribute to this actually, because I've had an inside experience of how the spies can game the democratic oversight process. But I'm speaking, of course, about the UK, which can teach even the Americans a thing or two about secrecy legislation and whistleblowers.
You know James Bond, right? I'm just throwing that out there.
That's a wonderful PR exercise. This is why Fleming was allowed to publish, I think, because it's the best recruiting thing they've ever had. No, in the UK, for the first 80 years of the spy agencies, they didn't officially exist. So none of our political representatives could ever ask anything about them. whatever scandal happened. And after a series of spy scandals in the 1980s, Peter Wright's spy catcher most notably, they put the intelligence agencies on a legal footing for the first time in 1989, which meant that they had to be under ministerial oversight. And if they wanted to do something otherwise illegal, they had to get the prior written permission of their government minister. So this is great. And I was there in the 1990s, and they still gamed the process. They would lie to their ministers. They could cover anything up, because the ministers had no way of finding out what the spies were getting up to. Plus, the ministers also suspected, rightly, that the spies held personal files on them. Tail wagging the dog in a democracy. Now, that was the best years. Those are the best years. Since 9/11, with the intelligence gloves coming off, we've seen the intelligence agencies in the UK get involved in things like torture, extraordinary rendition, kidnapping, drone assassination lists. And the ministers, and of course on Snowden, the ministers still say, no, we know what's going on. We've signed a warrant. They get a summary of a summary of a summary of a summary of whatever. They have no idea what they're signing. And they call that democratic oversight. It's rubbish.
So to counter that, I think the perception, at least what I'm getting from here, is that, the United States, we just kind of go around and do whatever the heck we want to, right? So it's like, hey, the NSA can, unfiltered access to every piece of information that's happening in the internet right now, and all signals and everything goes through the NSA, and it's meticulously looked through, and we're monitoring every single thing that you're doing on an every single day basis. That couldn't be further from the truth. If you actually knew the process to get something approved in the NSA, it's so overly cumbersome that it's almost beneficial to not do it than it is. And so to say that we're sitting there actively going after things and we're assassinating people just because of a specific belief or process is rubbish. It's absolutely rubbish, and working inside of the United States, I can honestly tell you that. And just today, just as an example, the Supreme Court ruled that our departments, the FBI, CIA, et cetera, are not allowed to do surveillance on United States citizens without a warrant. All right, so that was today. That was our Supreme Court. Our judges ruled on that. We actually have judges in the United States, believe it or not, people. We have judges that actually rule on things.
Wasn't that the case before today as well?
It was, but we're challenging the United States. When something happens, we have the right to challenge it, and the Supreme Court can review it and identify whether or not it's legitimate or not.
Okay.
And so you have cases all the time. I mean, let's take an example. There was another thing where the Supreme Court ruled that some of the appointees during President Obama's administration were not acceptable because it wasn't during a specific period of time. So things happen all the time, infractions occur. We're not perfect. Human beings, I haven't found a human being that's perfect yet.
Sorry, how can you challenge a ruling that's made by a secret court like Pfizer and take it up to the Supreme Court?
We are doing that now. We're doing it absolutely now. You have the EFF. That's not true. We're doing it way before Snowden. The EFF was established well before Snowden ever leaked his documents. We were challenging the courts well before that. He didn't have to leak all of those documents. And by the way, the documents that you see, you have a great PowerPoint there that has a synopsis of what happens. Do you know the approval process for any of that? Do you know how to even actually use any of that technology on a specific target? Do you know what the approval process for that is? Multiple approvals throughout the entire chain, approval for courts. We have a ton of stuff that we have to do in order to do it. It's not like we're black bagging people in the United States, grabbing them and running them off to a specific, unknown location in Guantanamo. I know that's what you see in the news, but believe it or not, we don't have a whole bunch of, Americans stuck in Guantanamo Bay right now. They're not there.
You've assassinated American citizens. The US has assassinated American citizens.
And that was a very polarly charged debate. Whether or not, there's a lot of Americans that disagree with it, and there's a lot of Americans that agree with it. And you know what? That's great, because we spark those discussions, and we have them, and we keep our people in check, and we don't vote them in next year. We have senators and congressmen and women that we vote in and out based on their policies. And that's why it's a democratic process. Like, hey, we don't like our president because he has this specific view. Let's vote for somebody that can do this. Or hey, we don't agree with a specific policy. Good, we can vote them out and go somewhere else. That's the process we have.
This is so naive. This is a military security complex now. Everyone can see that. The vested interests of the corporatists are so embedded in the process, especially since they took the brakes off who could fund which presidential campaign. And that's what we're seeing. There's no doubt about it.
I want to get into something that, Annie, you used a word a minute ago that I found intriguing, and you used the word with respect to the NSA, dragnet. Now, in the world of security, many of you and we all have seen various applications. Some places have all the security controls turned off, so then you have to turn them on intentionally. Some dumbass people in companies have all the controls turned off access to everything, and then you have to go in and figure out which ones to turn off. Completely different philosophies. Now, when we look at the TSA, which was a 9/11 result, the result, according to many people, is TSA assumes everybody is guilty, and you have to prove innocence to get on an airplane. When you look at the Israeli and the El Al model that occurred after the Munich 1972 Olympic event, they developed a system that is highly targeted and highly used in many places here in Europe as well, that profiles people. So, two entirely different philosophies. Now, with regards to the NSA, we do seem to be using a dragnet. David, can we address the difference between real profiling, real accuracy, and targeting that we typically probably have done in many military campaigns since World War II, versus what seems to be occurring right now of a complete metadata and a minimum dragnet?
So what I can talk about is related to my experiences when I was in Iraq specifically, all right? So obviously, whether or not you agree with the war or not, and you're pro or against it, I was there. I was there during the initial invasion. I was there when you saw the shock and awe. I was in Baghdad. I was in Al-Ramadi. I was in Fallujah. I saw some of the most horrible things you can possibly imagine because war is horrible. But when you say that, when we have intelligence agencies, we were saving people's lives, American lives, when we were going through and doing it. So we knew exactly where our targets were. We knew they were bad guys, and we knew exactly who we were going after. It's no different from what the NSA is doing. All of our intelligence that came through the NSA was accurate, was factual. We knew exactly who we were going after, our specific targets, and what they were doing. And these guys are nasty, nasty people. They're people that burn people alive, they torture people. It's not like we're sitting there like grabbing free people that are not doing anything bad. We're going after people that are absolutely horrendous human beings. And when you look at what we're talking about here, when we talk about the intelligence process and the approval for it, we have to have legitimate and accurate data in order to go after things. It has to be solid in order for somebody to approve a mission, or it has to be solid for somebody to go after it. And do we make mistakes? There's no question. Again, human beings, not perfect. But to say that we're a militarized state and that I'm so far into the corporate and government and military side is ridiculous. I want to protect my way of life. And will I do that at any cost? Probably. And if I look at other countries, China, for example, all right? It's like, hey, I'm a company inside of China. I can call up my equivalent to the NSA and say, break into all these countries and steal all their data and grab it and use it so that I can be competitive in the United States market. That's bullshit. We're losing a lot of things to active governments, and we have to have a response to do it. And so that's where I'm at. We have to be able to be competitive. We have to be able to go against them. And are we using it to steal from other governments to use our own for intellectual property? No. That's not our job.
I still don't hear an answer to the question.
Can I ask another question then? Because you're out of time, David.
The question was getting all of the data versus highly targeted data.
Can I answer this question with another question? Who in this room has heard of Mega Upload and Kim.com? Yeah, quite a few. Yeah, I thought there would be. So, those who don't know this case, this is a guy who set up a system where it's like Dropbox, you could stuff stuff into this. Businesses used it, pirates used it to upload films, other people would then download them, whatever. But he always claimed, and I think it's probably right technically, as far as I'm aware, that he didn't know what was going into the system. So then, we get this merger, and I absolutely do stand by my corporatist. We get this merger where the copyright interests, the big media conglomerations in the US, then somehow managed to ensure that Kim.com's website, Mega Upload, is taken down with no pre-warning, and also his house and his business in New Zealand is raided by an FBI SWAT team. Now, who in America, of the corporate media, the sort of Hollywood moguls, whatever, can just ring up the FBI and say, can you go and take this guy down, raid his house, shoot, with helicopters and everything, if there is not a merger of the corporate and the state? How could that happen?
Was he breaking the law? The United States law, was he breaking the law?
The United States law works within the United States. I don't believe they have a legal global hegemony yet, although they are trying to claim it by taking down, without any due process, any top-tier domain names such as .com, .org, .info, .net, or whatever.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the answer. Did he break the law? The law that is there today?
We don't know because he hasn't been on trial yet, and I think he's innocent until proven proven guilty, Dave.
So if somebody goes and murders somebody, and their body's laying down on the ground, should they not grab that person and then put him through due process to make sure that he's guilty or
Well,
not?
he's only found,
Or should we have
you only know he's murdered someone if he's then found guilty in a court of law. We haven't had that yet. All we've had is FBI SWAT
You still
teams
put him in prison until he's found guilty or innocent, right?
No, not necessarily.
That's how it works in the United States. If you murder somebody, you don't keep him on the streets and say, hey, he's cool, he's not going to do it again.
You are conflating the idea that didn't Kim.com murder somebody when he just operated
He
a
broke the law,
website?
or he broke
You
the
cannot
law.
say that. In fact, I think you're slandering him by saying that because he has not been found guilty. I'd be careful.
Allegedly, like you all.
Thank you, Dave. I want to return to the question that nobody's answered. Dragnet. Is dragnetting data absolutely required for efficient targeting of the serious bad guys?
Absolutely not.
Dave said, I did not answer it.
How can you answer that? Do you know?
Yes, I can, because I worked in intelligence, and I know that the best way of trying to target and find operative terrorists or people who are threatening national security or the economic well-being of your state, which is what the spy agencies are there to do, not to spy on their own people in a dragnet surveillance in case you might commit thought crime in the future, is to find the people who want to do you harm. And it's no different from police work. I think Eric would probably concur with this, that you make a case. If you want to invade someone's privacy to try and find out what they're plotting, what they might do that will cause society and your community harm, you make a case on prima facie evidence, you put it up to a judge or the authorities, and then you ask them to sign the warrants so that it can be done in a democratic and proportionate manner. Dragnet surveillance is not proportionate, it is not democratic, it is totalitarian. Now, I do support the proportionate argument, because there are nasty people out there who want to harm us and want to harm the way of life. But, you know, this pendulum has swung way too far.
How many terrorist attacks have dragnet type surveillance stopped?
In the US, apparently 0, despite the fact that General Keith Alexander lied under oath to Congress, saying that 54 cases have been stopped recently.
So I would say be careful with that because you don't know, right? Would you know that the NSA had successful stops of terrorist attacks?
I don't know, but Keith Alexander, you would think, would have known, and he got caught out lying. And it's not controversial.
That's not accurate. Keith Alexander's testimony when he was on Capitol Hill, he was not answering the direct question of how many terrorist attacks that they've stopped because the intelligence sources that they would have to leave for that.
Well, perhaps you can answer that question then.
Well, I think it's a good debate, though. I mean, how can you say that the dragnet policies of being able to do surveillance and target individuals based off of certain criteria isn't working? You don't know.
We don't know, but you can never take the risk 100% out of what might happen in your country. What you have to do is balance the risk against the freedom. And I think at the moment we've been going helter-skelter down this path towards this NSA technological superiority, muscular response, so that
We're
we
doing
can
that
do
in
dragnet
World War
surveillance.
II. It's the same thing we're doing in World War I and World War II. Technological superiority, being able to crack crypto of other countries, being able to sit there and surveillance them, is no different today than it is 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago.
I think there's slight differences. We didn't have the internet in World War II.
We
Now,
had the
Alan
ability to
Turing
catch
and the rest of
ourselves.
the guys who cracked Enigma, and the women who cracked Enigma, yes, did save potentially millions of lives by doing that. And it was a marvellous feat. But computer technology was in its infancy. What we have now is computer technology embedded in our entire lives. Not just how we communicate, but also our banking, our health, the very infrastructure of our democratic societies. And if we sign that over, if we hand it over willingly to the spies who might be working unaccountably, out of control, completely without democratic oversight, and who knows, perhaps not potentially in our own interests as citizens of their country, then we have lost our democracies. Now, I salute what they did in the Second World War. I really do. They won, and they saved democracy for another 60 years. But in the West, we are bloated and at ease with the idea of these rights that our grandfathers won. We need to continue to fight for them.
I think Aaron wants to contribute, and then Hans, and then we have a question from the audience.
Yeah, just a comment. Earlier, Hans talked about big data. He talked about dragnets. There is an issue of technology. When we're facing the internet today, what people are doing, people and organizations are doing on the internet, and when we are looking for crime, yes, you need to use a number of tools to find in that whole internet what people are doing wrong. So you need specific tools to do an article last month, I guess, criticizing the fact that an intelligence agency was looking for a technology to detect sarcasm or whatever like that on Twitter. Detecting the nature of the content of messages through the number of messages you're looking at, because there's a lot of messages published, is important. We need to be able to say, okay, this guy is saying nonsense, this guy is serious about what he's talking about, he wants to commit an offense, he's talking about it, or he's just making a joke about it. And we need to be able to filter that out. We need some help in doing that. So we need the technology. It looks scary if you say that it's spying everybody, but it does not, and it is necessary with the type of information that is flowing today, that is published today, and it's the type of police work we need to be doing. So let's not be scared of technology. I hope nobody in this place is scared of technology. We need to know how to use it properly, with the proper controls and everything.
Yeah, of course we need to use technology, and we can't live anymore without technology, I would say.
Solar flares.
Oh yeah, let's start the discussion on solar flares.
That was my question. That was my question.
Come on stage, no. Technology is very important, but where will we go when we can't trust technology anymore? Right now we are using the internet for all kinds of things. Do our banking via the internet, shopping via the internet, everything via the internet. But if we can't trust that technology anymore, where will we go? What will the internet become at that time? And I'm looking at the people in this room as well, because you are the guys and girls that can actually make a change there. You know, you understand that technology and can make sure that the trust is not lost.
We have a question from the audience.
This is more as much as it's against my nature, but this is more a comment on the side of the NSA. Kim's house was not raided by the FBI. It was raided by the New Zealand police, which is a very important distinction to make, because even if the raid happened on request of the FBI still used the policies and the ways to get stuff done that are there by law to get the house raided. They didn't fly to New Zealand and then raided his house, and they might have legally got access to the tapes, but it wasn't their fault, in quotes, because the New Zealand police actually sent them the data. It wasn't the FBI that raided his house, which is a very important detail, I think.
Thank you. My understanding is that's what is legal, and that's why Kim.com has been challenging it through the New Zealand courts. It was a joint operation. I just find it interesting, though, that the media corporate interests in the US can crack the whip and get something like that done halfway across the world.
We have another question from the audience.
So you spoke earlier about the scale of the interception. You are doing a global scale interception. When there's one question, so what are you doing with this data? And what will we be able to do with this data later? Because collecting data is only a part of the problem. Is how will you keep this data? What will you do with that? And with global, there is also something else. There is, I think, 189 countries of the world. So potentially 189 different laws. So you asked about Kim.com, who was breaking the law. How much law did you break with your global interception? So it's well, there is a lot of problem with the global things. You can't only speak about what you do but what everybody do and what everybody are able to do.
That's fair. I think if you look at what a spy agency does, most of it's secretive. So, how long they collect the data for, what they use the data for, it's all governed by specific rules and regulations that come out through, everything from, approval processes throughout the government to legislative branches and everything else. Now, in stating that, what I'll say is, my primary focus when I was in the intelligence community was SIGINT, or signals intelligence, okay? And SIGINT is mostly about collecting airwaves, right? And cracking cryptography and things like that. Again, it's something that was good for us, right? In World War II, but it's not now, somehow. But when you look at that, if you look at that process there, that's an old process. It's been around for, 60, 70, 80, 90 years, right? Since the birth of signals. You look at the new cyber movement with the internet, and to Heinz's point, we have technology embedded in everyday aspects of our lives. So when you look at that part, the cyber stuff is still very, very new. You're looking at maybe 10 or 15 years since the cyber stuff really started becoming at least somewhat relevant. So there's still a lot of catching up I think we have to do rule-wise and legislative-wise. But at the same time, I can't answer a question of how long do they store for and what are they using it for, because that's what a spy agency does. They use it for their own purposes based on the laws that they're governed and dictated by. But at the same time, we should be questioning our government, making sure we're doing the right things, because that's a democracy. We have those avenues now. The Supreme Court ruled against warrantless cell phone searches. You had a lot of different areas and a lot of different things with the EFF and a lot of successes with the EFF on infringements and infractions. Again, we're not perfect. So it's up to us to challenge that and see if it's legally allowed, and if they're allowed to do it, what are the rules and regulations behind it. We're not these gunslinging, I guess I am, I own like 20 guns, but we're not these guys that are just going around collecting all this data and using it for whatever the heck we want to. It is very, very methodical, it's very, very refined, and how many processes, if you knew the amount of, I have a lot of friends that work in the different intelligence agencies. My time's up here, so I'll wrap it up and you're going to nail me there. The amount of effort that they have to go through just to do something simple is astronomical. And that's not coming from me, it's what's in the news right now, it's what's in the public now. So it's not like we're just gunslinging around, collecting everything and spying on everybody. It's not what we do.
I'm afraid it is. Who is it for the NSA to decide how we're all spied on around the planet? And it's not just the NSA. GCHQ, the UK version, has been developing mainlining technologies of fibre optic cables coming across the Atlantic, temporary program. And our Foreign Secretary said, oh no, but it's all okay, it's legal because I've signed off on this big warrant to allow it to happen legally in the UK. Which is great for the UK citizens, we're all happy bunnies. However, it means that the other 440 million Europeans who are also being listened to by GCHQ have no say in it. So what on earth is our Foreign Secretary doing saying that's legal for the rest of the people?
Well, there was an article that came out last several days regarding a fiber interception program called Warp Drive, and the BND from Germany got outed as being cooperative with NSA on it. So it's, from what open source, it's even not just the UK. So to blame the UK for all of Europe, does Europe, are they any different?
I'm just pointing out the UK bit because I'm aware of that, and in fact our Foreign Secretary has said he has the gaming over Europe. But it's all our intelligence agencies. I think GCHQ is the most obvious case because they have prostituted themselves to the NSA. Why do you think the UK still claims to have a seat at the top diplomatic table? It's got nothing to do with a special trade relationship or the old Second World War stuff when, we all stood shoulder to shoulder against an existential threat of totalitarianism. It's nothing to do with that. It's the fact that the GCHQ has prostituted itself and they've actually picked themselves out to the NSA saying, our oversight laws are weaker than yours. Come and use us to spy on your people. This is what they've done, and they've received about $100 million over the last few years. They are shameless. And I suppose it's slightly more concerning that the German BND, which is supposed to be circumscribed by a very strong constitution to inhibit spy activities, post-Gestapo, post-Stasi, are then pimping themselves out to the NSA too. Where is it going to stop? So yes, that point the gentleman made earlier about all our different groups. Yes,
Eric?
Yeah, a short one on breaking the laws and back to my job. It's difficult today to be working and investigating those cases. So not just spying is difficult, just doing regular law enforcement work. When we're doing an investigation in France, and when we find data on a suspect's computer that's connected to the internet, to the cloud, there's data somewhere else. Maybe if we're copying that data, we're committing an offense in another country. In some cases it's legal, in other cases it's not legal. It's difficult for the law enforcement guy to check. Has the country where the data is, and you don't know where the data is in reality, has the country where the data is signed and ratified the Council of Europe Convention on Cybercrime? Sometimes you don't know. And a second example about breaking the law, service providers on the other side, especially in the US for that instance, are actually warning our suspects about the fact that we're asking them information about the suspect. And they're presenting that as a protection of the privacy of their users. In France, that's committing an offense, because they're not allowed to give information about an ongoing investigation. So it's difficult to find the right balance. And it'll take a number of years, maybe a number of decades, before we find the proper balance for what should be the law and what should be the rule of law around the world on those issues. It's difficult.
And then another question from the audience.
I can imagine it is difficult, and the internet being around for, today, 25 years on a commercial basis. I think it's time that you actually work to get the laws to integrate, because right now cybercrime is not bounded by borders anymore. Yeah, if I want to commit a crime in the UK, I can do this via the internet, because a website is located in the UK, and I'm located in...
You better do that in the UK than in the Netherlands.
I don't know. But get your act together. Work on it. It's difficult, yes, but if you don't do anything about it, it stays difficult.
And it's being worked on. The problem is it's not that easy to convince everybody that they should have a law.
Only within Europe, and Europe
actually,
States.
Yeah.
But Russia, China, India, where are those countries?
Australia has signed the convention, Mexico has signed the convention, South Africa has signed the convention.
So
it's
right
progress.
Now, okay, there is progress, you say, but right now, if someone from, let's take another African country, Egypt, a guy there breaks into a system in the Netherlands, how do you prosecute it?
If it's really a serious offense, it's not going to be that difficult, because there is cooperation with those countries. It's not really the issue. If the question is, it becomes very technical legally for law enforcement and the judges, and it's getting more and more complicated. That's what I wanted to point out. Right. I'm not saying there's no solutions or that there shouldn't be any solutions.
There is a solution, of course, once the laws are integrated, like I said before. It is, but we have to work on that, because right now some police organizations within the Netherlands are already talking about hacking back into systems from criminals to gain information.
And it's a good question to be asking. Should we be able to, in what circumstances,
right.
How?
That's why I raised this question.
I think there is a lot of cooperation between a lot of different countries, not all of them by any means. I mean, working with some of the different intelligence agencies and working with a lot of different law enforcement, they have cooperation in a lot of different states for going after criminals. Now, obviously, there has to be a clear and cut, delineation of what they did, proof of that, and actually going after them. There's a lot of cohesion that's going on between them. Now, let's take other countries, for example, like, let's just say Iran. We don't necessarily see eye to eye with the United States and Iran. And I'm not saying that's between Iran and the United States, it's different belief systems, right? Obviously, we're not going to have a lot of cooperation with them because we're not necessarily allies in a lot of the cases. Same thing goes for Russia, probably less cooperation now with the Ukraine incident. So, it really depends on the political nature of, different countries and how they're behaving with each other for that cooperation. A lot of them have great cooperation. You get something here in the United States or something that happens in the UK that comes from the United States, they're going to work very closely together. Same thing goes for even other countries that have a significant amount, like the African countries. A lot of them are cooperating with the United States and vice versa. So it's just where the crime is actually happening, the treaties and the cooperation we have with the different governments based on beliefs, and after that it starts to work together. So it's not like it's not happening. We can go after people in Russia as long as we have a clear-cut case.
All right, we have another audience question from Jason.
I got a question for the activists. I got a question for the activists. It's like, so I need to make it clear. It's like, do you believe that any country from Paraguay to Poland, if they had the budget, the means, and the technology, would, even if they had that, they would say, well, we're not going to be like the NSA. They wouldn't spy on other countries. They wouldn't spy on their citizens. They wouldn't utilize that technology. Second part of the question, are we upset with the NSA because they're being that invasive because they have the means and technology? Are we upset because they're so good at it? Are we upset because we found out about it? It's like just the two questions is the two-part question is one, you don't think any other country that had the means and the ability and stuff to actually do that would do it? It's like, it's like, oh yeah, we've got this huge stuff, but we're not going to do that because we're not like the NSA and stuff, or is it because of the fact that we have to admit and look ourselves in the mirror and say every country on this planet, if had the technology and the means, right or wrong, would be doing the same exact thing? So, I mean, that's just...
I'll pick up on that. It was a very basic question. The reason why...
I'm a very basic person.
No, but a very basic question is, why on earth did we put in place the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, immediately after the horrors of World War II? Because we wanted to prevent subsequent horrors along the same lines. And this is supposed to, most countries around the planet have signed up to the UN conventions. We should be applying them still. But because technology is outpaced the memories of the horrors of World War II, suddenly we're just forgetting about them. Well, we don't care. We don't need privacy. We don't need the right not to be tortured. We don't need the right not to be extrajudicially murdered or snatched out of your home or killed for your religion. Right? Because that doesn't happen now in this modern world. Unfortunately, it does. And technology is enabling that. So actually, I would suggest all power will take power if it can take more power, and that's what technology is enabling. What we need to do is ensure that our universal rights keep pace with the technology, and then the laws will follow.
I actually want to read a quote from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because that was going to be one of my questions. Article 12, and this is addressed... Okay, Dave. Article 12 of that declaration, which 140-some countries did sign in December of '48, says, no one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence. Aren't we violating that in this U.S. now?
It's a great question. Yeah, when you owe me more than dinner, I need another beer. When you look at what we're doing, are we selectively going into people and murdering them because of their religious beliefs? Are we? Is the NSA comparable to what Hitler did in World War II? No. We're not actively going out and slaughtering, helpless women and children for a specific belief.
Yes, you are. And you're doing it in Pakistan, and you're doing it across Central Asia, you're doing it across the Middle East, you're doing it across North Africa with drone strikes. I'm sorry. Drone strikes are not targeted, they are not intelligence-led. They are killing wedding parties, they are killing meetings and councils of village elders. They have killed thousands of people over the last few years, extrajudicially.
So where were you when the Twin Towers hit? Because I can remember where I was at. And then I can remember when I was in Iraq fighting the same guys, or Afghanistan fighting the same guys. Right? So when we actively go after people, we're going after people that blew us up and killed women and children maliciously.
Hang on, you went into Iraq because they were the ones who were supposed to have blown you up maliciously, including women and children.
So ISIS is taking over the country and a huge Al-Qaeda influence wasn't there prior to us going in? That's ridiculous.
Saddam Hussein was a secularist.
I'll give you a
He
break.
had more to fear from Al-Qaeda than most other powers across the world. No, that's a load of rubbish.
So the Al-Qaeda training camps that were there, that were documented by Saddam, that were there actively training, weren't there in the first place? We must have created that, I'm sorry, we did that too, so.
I come from Britain. I worked in intelligence in the 1990s at the height of the provisional IRA bombing campaign on the UK mainland. Now, through the 70s, 80s and 90s, we went through all these debates about civil liberties. Can you intern people? Can you kidnap them? Can you torture them? And we chose not to. We chose not to give up our civil liberties. And we were facing weekly attacks on the streets of London. And now we face this nebulous Al-Qaeda. We've had 1 or 2 attacks in the UK. We've given everything up. It's crazy because of this hysteria around the war on terror. It is not right.
I don't disagree with her point that we should challenge our government in the face of hysteria. There should be, our government is elected by us, the people, right? So we should have the right to challenge them, as we do. We actively challenge them all the time, every single day, in courts all around our country. Every single day. You didn't have the Twin Towers fall down. You didn't have all the people dying in front of us and New York shut down completely. You didn't have that. So you mentioned Iraq. You said Iraq. Well, Iraq, you were supposed to. What about Afghanistan? Were we supposed to not go into there? When we traced the people that actively blew up our entire, centralized portion of New York down, we weren't supposed to go in there either?
That was the one big attack, and you've punished the whole world for it. The UK has been subject to terrorist attacks from Irish terrorism for decades, and thousands of people have died, and thousands of people have been tortured and interned. It was a bloody civil war in Northern Ireland. And you know what? Colonel Gaddafi was castigated as being one of the biggest funders of the provisional IRA. And sure, he did. He gave him lots of money, he gave him lots of Semtex and lots of AK-47s. But you know what the biggest funder was? An organisation called NORAID in America. The North American Aid to Irish Defence. And this was the Irish community, probably just thinking they're helping, charities or whatever in Northern Ireland, but a lot of the money got money laundered and channeled. And they were the biggest funders of the provisional IRA for 3 decades. The funding only dried up after 9/11.
As we move forward with technology, we sort of opened the conference with some of the comments that I made about the future technologies, and I want to throw one out and get some fast concepts. As the solar flares, thank you, Jason. Drones are coming. How is that going to impact all of the surveillance activities, not just from the NSA, BND, or UK perspective, but as they become increasingly privatized and then they become $100 surveillance devices? How are we tying all that together? What's the impact? Hans.
Right. Drones are coming, and as a matter of fact, over in the Netherlands, some police forces are actively using them to monitor events at this time. While at the same time, there has been a call for papers or call for interest in creating technology to actually bring down those drones or disrupt the signals from drones. And I don't know if it's only commercial drones or even others.
Dave, how's that going to impact intelligence at the commercial level? Because right now there's allegations that the data that is collected by Google and Microsoft, and as it came out today or yesterday, Verizon has just been thrown out of Germany for enforced cooperation with data being requested that they have to comply. How is that going to affect everything if that kind of enforcement is still requested in the future with new drone technology?
Well, I mean, if you look at the drone programs, by the way, I own 3 drones. Well, let me rephrase it. I own 1 drone, I crashed the other 2. My wife doesn't know about that, so hopefully this doesn't go on live camera anywhere. But anyways, when you look at commercial drone use, I mean, obviously it's getting more and more elevation. There's what we call the FAA in the United States, which are actively kind of going against the corporate environments. When you look at intelligence gathering through our drone programs, it's a very controversial subject. Who are we targeting, loss of life, everything that we're going after. Is it accurate? Are we actually doing the right mission? And to be honest, it's a debate that's been going on in the United States now for several years. I mean, our drone program's been active for, I don't know if you know, but I think our first drone was 7 years ago, something like that. So, I mean, if you look at how long the drone program has been going on, we're continuing to get different views and perspectives on it, and I think it should be something that we challenge as a country, and we challenge as, as a world to make sure that it's legitimate and that we're doing what we need to do. I'm not opposed to, saying, hey, the people, you should probably, take a look at this and make sure it's the right thing, and what we decide is what we do. That's what we do in the United States. It's the way we have the debates, it's the way we have protests, it's the way we challenge them with different organizations to go after them. So whether or not it's right or wrong is not up to me. But I mean, if you look at what we're able to do with our drone programs, I mean, if it's misused, it can obviously be very bad, because we can collect information and intelligence pretty much from anyone, right? And we can go after anybody in the world, and we can do it from a keyboard. So there's a lot of things. I don't know if anybody's watched 24, the new 24, where they hijacked a drone and the guy, anyways, I think they hijacked like 7 drones. Very unrealistic, obviously, but it could happen too. So there's a lot of concerns on all sides.
Annie, any thoughts on the drones?
Well, coming from the UK, which is CCTV central, yes. Because, of course, this started off with blanket coverage of CCTV cameras on the streets, both public and private. Then it grew into talking CCTV cameras, trialled, which are now spreading, where they watch you live and they can actually bark orders at you if they see you doing something wrong. Kid you not? And now it's turning into drones, and they're being used against protesters and that sort of thing. But actually, I'd like to go back a few years before, it's not a drone attack I want to mention. It's actually a helicopter attack. And this was what Chelsea Manning revealed. Do you remember the WikiLeaks, first big WikiLeaks disclosure, collateral murder? And you have a situation here where it's a video of the Apache helicopters shooting up people in Baghdad, I think it was, and murdering not only journalists, but also the family people who went to try and help these injured men. And it was covered up. And it was only through WikiLeaks and the leak from Chelsea Manning that this came out. And yet, Chelsea Manning is the one now serving 35 years in prison for disclosing war crimes in the US military. And the people who shot up and killed these innocent people not only have never been prosecuted, but the Pentagon's got away with lying to their families for about 5 years as well in the process. It's only because of whistleblower found out it happened. This is the shooting from the air stuff that we're seeing.
Well, we're getting close to the end, because this could go on for decades, I think somebody said. And I've kind of got, hopefully, one question that will help us wrap this up. It sounds like undercurrent theme that everybody is coming to is the concept of transparency, which also means a matter of trust, both of which are in question right now on both sides of the aisle. Each of you, 2 minutes. What's the answer? How can we rebuild the trust in the governments that are supposed to help us and not make us fearful of them? So let's begin with Eric, and then we'll go to Annie, Hans, and over to Dave.
Thank you. It's what I've been doing for years that I believe is necessary. Explaining to the public, going to the public in front of audiences, explaining them what your job is about, how it works. Not all the details, because we need to keep some of the details, but really being able to respond to the public about what we're doing, listening to the critics, what people have to say about what you're doing that is not good enough or not transparent enough or not maybe legal in some cases and so on. Listen and learn. You actually improve your process through the questions. You get more ideas and new directions to look at, new solutions. So yes, it's a lot about going in front of the public and discussing those. In front of the public means in front of an audience by writing a book. Today we have the internet. I'm on the internet and people can address me. Not too much, please. I get too many emails. Yeah, it's part of our job. It's part of what a lot of politicians are doing today, and I think it's a good thing. That would be my answer. There's others, but that's the first one.
Hans, how do we rebuild trust?
The only way to rebuild trust is increased transparency, because without transparency, there's no trust. if you if you have no idea what's going on, you can't trust someone. So how do we do that? That's an enormous question, but I don't have an answer to that. The only thing I can do is educate people by going out in the street and talk about these issues. And well, recently, the last couple of years, the last 5 years or so, people actually understand what I'm doing. Before that, if I told them I was a hacker and I helped companies increase their security, they would look at me and say, "What's it?" Right now, if I go out and tell them I'm working in IT security, they understand what it means. So that's one step we already took. We still have to make another 10 steps to actually come to a place where people do understand the issues and want to help us as well to advance.
Penny.
No, I agree. I think trust has broken down appallingly, particularly since 9/11 and the invasion of Iraq, where it became very obvious that it's very easy for us as people, as citizens, to be lied to. And I think we owe a debt of gratitude to the whistleblowers who have come out since, not just Manning, the WikiLeaks project, and Snowden, but also the earlier NSA people coming out like Tom Drake and Kurt Wheeler and William Barr, because they at least are the regulators of last resort. They show us that we have been lied to. And if we don't know we've been lied to, we can't make informed decisions as citizens within a notional democracy. So to rebuild that trust, yes, it has to be transparency. It has to be accountability. It has to be the fact that if people are elected officials lie, particularly under oath, they are held to account. Or our corporations break the law, they are held to account. We see this time and time again not happening. So to have transparency and accountability is our best hope to have justice for all of us. Otherwise, we always have asymmetric power in this world. And I would suggest that hackers, the geek community generally, is our best line of defense now. Because we have the skills, you have the skills to fight back. We are the new resistance to fight for justice and to fight for our basic rights.
Dave, you have the first word, you get the last word.
So I
The
think
NSA always does.
America, no. Actually, I think what's interesting here is I think Andy and I will agree on certain points. I think there has to be transparency. Well, and everybody here, but I think there has to be transparency between our governments and the people. There's no question about that. What I also agree is there has to be accountability when those rules are broken and violated. Not going to get any disagreement from me whatsoever on that. We have rules in place, we have things to be done to protect our people, and if that's violated and things are covered up or relied upon, people should be held accountable for that. I completely agree with that in every way, shape, or form. Would everybody here say that the world is a perfect place? Yeah, I got one. It's good. It's one. So that's like a 99.999999999% believes that it's not a perfect place. Okay? So you take that statistic and you look at what we're dealing against. We have a lot of different enemies. We have a lot of different things that are coming up the pipeline for us. And I'm saying us as our beliefs and philosophies in the world. I mean, I personally don't want to, be in a state where it's completely run by a specific dictator and, all these other things, right? Those aren't my beliefs. I'd like to be what I consider free. In doing that, we have to make sure we protect ourselves in every way, shape, or form to protect our interests and make sure that our beliefs stay strong. And I think we're doing that. Now, I don't disagree with having more transparency of what we're doing, as long as it doesn't compromise our methods of actually getting that intelligence. When you look at intelligence, the reason we can get intelligence is because they don't know we're doing it. Everybody agree with that? Or no? So, Osama bin Laden, we were tracking him with his Iridium phone, right? So we're tracking Osama bin Laden with his Iridium phone. It leaked out to the press that we were tracking satellite communications with the Iridium phone. He stopped using his Iridium phone. So if they know how we're tracking them, they're going to stop using those techniques. So we have to be secretive because we're a spy organization to protect people. And at the same time, there has to be clear transparency to help people themselves. I know you're watching that clock as it goes down too, aren't you? So all I have to say, last but not least, we consider France a very key ally, right? I mean, we wouldn't have the United States without France. And conversely, France wouldn't have France without the United States. We work together, and there's things that we have to do together jointly. And I think we should all discuss that between all of our collectives and our interests to work to make something better with transparency to the people, period.
Thank you for staying late. This has been great. Hopefully we will continue the debate. Maybe we will be able to do something again next year. Maybe Olivier is a little less nervous. But please, let's hear it for our speakers, our debaters, the sponsors,